She was worth less than the dirt crushed beneath his boots, nothing more than a bargaining chip, a defect, a reminder of everything her alpha father wished he could erase. Erilyn, the wolfless daughter of the Silver Moon Pack, had become the shame Sultran could never hide. And so he did the unthinkable. He sold her. He sold his own child to a vicious rival alpha to settle a blood debt. They paraded her like livestock, humiliated her, pushed her forward as if she were an object with no pulse, no soul. Neither side realized someone else was watching from the shadows. They had no idea they were attempting to trade away the one woman on earth who belonged to the Alpha King. The scent of pine and damp soil only tightened Erilyn's chest. It reminded her of everything she lacked, every freedom she would never taste. At 20, she was a failure in the eyes of her pack, a woman with no wolf chained to the ground, while everyone else could run beneath the moon. In the rigid, power-hungry hierarchy of the Silver Moon Pack, her condition wasn't just unusual, it was unforgivable. She wasn't simply wolfless. She was worthless. Move, filth. Nivra hissed, shoving Erilyn so violently she stumbled and dropped the basket of freshly washed pelts. They splattered into the mud, soaking instantly. Nivra was everything. Erilyn was not tall, golden-haired, and blessed with a swift, gleaming silver wolf that had awakened on her 16th birthday. She was the pride of the pack the daughter Sultran paraded as proof of his greatness. Erilyn was the shadow in the corner, the runt, the girl who did chores so everyone else didn't have to. "Look what you've done, you useless mess," Nivra sneered, arching a perfect eyebrow. "Now I'll smell like your failure when I take these to father." Erilyn didn't respond. She simply crouched down and gathered the ruined pelts, her fingers trembling, her nails digging deep crescents into her palms. Silence. Silence was the only shield she had left. Speaking would only twist into another accusation, another slap across the face, or worse, another week without food. Sultran hadn't spoken to her with kindness in nearly 4 years, not since her failed awakening under the full moon when nothing happened, and hope had died in the room with her. The elders had stared at her in pity that soon soured into contempt. Sultran's gaze had been harsher, a hollow disappointment she could never escape. She was the living reminder of everything he'd lost. His mate, Salis, Erilyn's mother, had died giving birth. A quiet, gentle woman from an old northern bloodline, one Erilyn knew almost nothing about. Sultran had been left with 2 daughters, Nivra, his bright flame, and Erilyn, the child he wished had never drawn breath. That evening, the pack hall pulsed with tension. Fear hung thick and sharp in the air. Sultran stood before the hearth, his jaw tight. The once respected Silver Moon Pack was collapsing. A string of terrible investments in human world ventures, especially a failed shipping deal with Thorncroft Holdings, and a brutal winter had gutted their resources. Worse still, they had trespassed into Obsidian Claw territory ruled by Alpha Dravor, a name spoken only in hushed, frightened tones. He was a brute, a war-hungry tyrant who built his power by crushing every pack that challenged him. And now he claimed Silver Moon owed him blood for the poachers his patrols had found. "He demands reparations," Sultran announced, his voice booming through the silent hall. "Reparations we cannot afford, neither in gold nor land." Fear rippled through the room. Nivra stood beside him, the picture of a future lunar beautiful, composed, untouchable. Erilyn watched from the shadows near the kitchen doors where she always stood. "Dravor is uncompromising," Sultran continued, pacing, "but he has offered one alternative, one way to end this blood debt and secure our border." A desperate spark flickered through the crowd. An alliance. He has demanded a bride. The room exploded in shock. Nevra's head snapped up, fear and something disturbingly close to excitement flickering in her gaze. "He doesn't want me, does he?" Father Nivra asked, her voice a trembling violin. "I'm your heir." "No daughter," Sultran said, and for the first time all evening he looked relieved. relieved to be sacrificing someone else. His gaze swept across the room and landed on the one person who didn't matter, Erilyn. He does not ask for the best of the pack, Sultran said, emotionless. He's heard rumors of a daughter kept in the shadows. A daughter with no value. The idea amuses him. He was trading her for safety, selling his useless daughter to a monster. Erilyn, he ordered. Her name on his lips felt like cold water down her spine. She stepped forward, her thin, worn tunic a painful contrast to everyone else's fine furs. The entire hall turned to look. Pity from a few, disgust from most, and from Nivra a triumphant smile. Draver has heard you're quiet, obedient Sultran said. It wasn't a question, it was a sentence. He thinks that makes you a suitable bride. He wasn't asking her anything, he was announcing her fate. He considers that a desirable quality in a wife. Sultran continued coldly. He has agreed to sign the Redstone Accord, wipe away our debts, and secure an alliance. In exchange for your hand. A few gasped. Sold, not married. Sold. It is a great honor for you, Erilyn. Her father added the lie, tasting like smoke as it left him. You will finally serve this pack. You will save us. Erilyn looked at the man who was supposed to be her father. She looked at the sister who despised her. She looked at the pack that had shoved her into shadows since childhood. And something inside her snapped. Not her spirit that had been crushed years ago. What broke was the last thin strand of hope that she might ever belong. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like something unused for decades. Sultran seemed satisfied by her silence, mistaking it for obedience rather than surrender. Be at the boundary line at dawn. Alpha Draver will receive you himself. Sultran turned away, already done with her. The pack murmured with relief. Crisis avoided. The cost was only Erilyn. She stood alone in the center of the great hall, the weight of her worthlessness wrapping around her like a burial cloth. She wasn't a daughter. She was a commodity, a handful of coins, a bargaining piece. No one spoke to her that night. They handed her a freshly washed but coarse linen dress, the outfit of a sacrifice. She didn't sleep. She sat beside the tiny attic window, staring at the moon that had denied her, the moon that had marked her as nothing. And for the first time in her life, she didn't pray for a wolf. She prayed for an ending. The boundary line was a dead strip of land gravel, skeletal trees, a bleak border carved into the earth. The air hung heavy with the metallic scent of the obsidian, claw-pack, burnt pine old blood, and undiluted aggression. Erilyn stood beside Sultran, her wrists bound loosely with leather, a symbol not of restraint, but of ownership. Nivra stood behind them, wearing a smug, pitying smirk that made Erilyn's stomach twist. Draver arrived as the first streaks of sunlight cut across the sky. He was nothing like any Alpha Erilyn had ever seen, broad as a mountain, his face carved with old scars like a map of violence. A long white scar slashed from his brow across his nose and vanished into his thick beard. His eyes were the color of rusted metal. He moved with the steady, heavy power of a predator. Two massive betas shadowing him. His scent rolled over her thick and rancid with dominance. She nearly gagged. Alpha Sultran Draver growled, his voice scraping like gravel down stone. He didn't acknowledge Erilyn at all. Alpha Draver Sultran answered, forcing a stiff smile. We are honored by your presence. We bring the offering as agreed. The accord. Draver grunted. He nodded to one of his betas who unrolled a parchment sealed in red wax. My end is fulfilled. Then he turned to Erilyn. He circled her slowly, inhaling her scent. It was the most degrading moment of her life. He was inspecting livestock. Small, he muttered. And she smells wrong. No wolf, no fire, nothing but soap and fear. He barked a laugh. You said she was obedient. That's all I require. His lips curled. A quiet body for my bed. and a living symbol of my mercy toward your pack." He pushed a calloused hand under her chin, tilting her face up. Erilyn met his gaze without flinching, though every nerve in her body screamed. "She has spark," Dravor mused. "I'll enjoy breaking that." "She is yours," Sultran said flatly. He stepped back, severing the last thread between them. "Good," Dravor said. He yanked the leather cord, binding her wrists, jerking her forward. "The redstone accord is sealed." No, a voice thundered. It wasn't loud yet. It tore through the clearing like a blast of lightning. Every wolf in sight, Sultran and Dravor, both betas, dropped instantly into a crouch of submission. Even Nivra, stunned, sank to one knee. Only Erilyn, the wolfless girl, remained standing, eyes wide, heart pounding. From the shadows of the western tree line they appeared. 10 figures dressed in black, light-forged armor that swallowed the morning light. They moved with perfect lethal precision. The scions of Magnus, the Alpha King's personal guard, a name spoken in awe and fear. And at their center, stepping forward as though the earth itself answered to him, was the king, Raikan. He walked into the clearing like he owned every breath of wind, every particle of dust, like the world bowed beneath him. Raikan, the Alpha King, ruling every werewolf territory, was nothing like the Alphas Erilyn had known. He wasn't a brute blinded by violence like Dravor, nor a calculating politician like Sultran. He was something far more dangerous. He was absolute. Tall, dark-haired like a raven's wing, eyes glacial and unyielding. He wore no crown, he didn't need one. A simple black tunic and trousers were enough. Power clung to him like a second skin, rolling off him in cold waves that dwarfed every alpha in the clearing. His arrival hadn't been announced. He hadn't been summoned, and yet he stood there radiating a lethal fury that made the air feel brittle. "Your Majesty," Sultran stammered, his face draining of color. We weren't expecting this as a private pack affair." Raikan's icy gaze slid over Sultran like he was nothing more than dust on the floor. His eyes locked next on the parchment in Dravor's hand. "A private matter." The king repeated, his voice a deep resonance that carried across the clearing. "You call an alliance that breaks 3 territorial laws and involves the trafficking of a pack member. An act. I forbade a private matter." Alpha Sultran Dravor, to his credit, forced himself upright, though the tightness of his posture betrayed his submission. "Your Majesty." "It's a simple marriage contract," he argued. "A settlement of debt. A debt." Raikan echoed, his voice suddenly soft, terrifyingly soft. The scions of Magnus spread out behind him, forming a perimeter of living shadows. "I see," Raikan continued. "And you, Dravor, believed you could craft this little treaty. The Redstone Accord, is that what you call it without my seal? You believed you could swallow Silvermoon territory under the guise of marriage, and I would not notice." Dravor's expression hardened. "It is my right. You have no rights. I do not grant you." Raikan snapped. The sheer power in his voice shoved Dravor backward a step. This was the kind of confrontation Erilyn had only ever heard rumors about: the king asserting his rule, crushing the old feudal power plays of the Alphas. What Sultran had done wasn't merely cruelty, it was treason. Raikan paced the clearing, his glacier blue eyes assessing the scene. Sultran trembling, Dravor seething, Nivra watching him with hungry, predatory interest. Then his gaze found Erilyn. It didn't glance, it collided. The world didn't pause. It detonated. Everything around her stripped away in an instant. The sense of pine and blood vanished, replaced by something fierce and intoxicating: winter storms and burning embers. A force slammed into Erilyn's chest, stealing her breath. She saw his eyes widen, ice shattering for a heartbeat, revealing the same primal shock tearing through her. One word rose inside her, unbidden, unknown, yet absolute: mate. Raikan had never been a fool. He lived by strategy, instinct, and ruthless precision. He'd come here to crush a rogue alliance, punish 2 insubordinate alphas, and reassert control along the northern border. He hadn't come to find his destiny. But the moment his eyes locked with the trembling girl in a gray tunic, every calculation vanished. The scent hit him first, not her fear, but something underneath it, something hidden. Winter laurel, fresh snow, a spark of ozone. His wolf roared awake, the scent of home, and she was his. The revelation wasn't gentle. It was a brutal, possessive claiming that ripped through him like lightning. His wolf clawed at his insides, growling a word so violent he almost said it aloud. Mine. Erilyn stumbled back, clutching her chest. She felt it too. He could see the terror and recognition swirling in her violet eyes. She was his, and she stood there bound like property being handed to Draver. A cold, lethal fury flooded the clearing, dropping the temperature around them. Get your hands off her! He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The command vibrated with pure alpha authority, so potent that Draver's body obeyed. Before his mind did, he released the cord as if struck. Draver snarled, baring his teeth, trying to reclaim his dominance. The girl is mine, Riken. She is the price of the accord. In a single blur of movement, Riken crossed the clearing. He didn't run. He simply appeared one moment beside his scions, the next standing directly before Dravor. His hand locked around Dravor's throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Dravor gagged, claws bursting from his fingers as he fought for air, scraping uselessly at the king's grip. The scions of Magnus Riken growled, his voice more wolf than man. His eyes were no longer icy blue. They were black with fury. You will not look at her. You will not touch her. You will not breathe her air. His glacier blue eyes had turned pitch black with something ancient and feral. You will not look at her. You will not breathe her air. Riken slammed Dravor against a tree so hard the trunk groaned under the impact. Come near her again, he snarled, voice low and lethal. He released him abruptly, letting Dravor hit the ground on his knees. Coughing, wheezing, clutching his bruised throat, the clearing fell into a suffocating silence, except for Dravor's ragged, broken breaths. Riken turned slowly. His gaze swept over Sultren, whose face was twisted with terror, then to Nivra, whose expression shifted from hungry ambition to venomous jealousy. He ignored them both. He walked toward Erilyn. She trembled where she stood, her violet eyes wide as full moons, staring at him like he was something unreal, something impossible. He noticed everything, the faint yellowed bruise on her cheek, the rope burns on her wrists, the thinness of her frame, the hollow hopelessness in her eyes. And beneath all of that, he saw his mate. The wildfire of his rage cooled, replaced by a fierce, frightening protectiveness that rooted itself deep into his bones. Slowly, so carefully it hurt to watch, he reached for her. Erilyn flinched, a tiny movement that sliced through him like a blade. I won't hurt you, Riken murmured, his voice softer than he had ever heard it. With one sharp pull, he tore apart the leather cord binding her wrists. He rubbed his thumbs over her raw skin, his touch unexpectedly warm. You, Erilyn whispered, voice unsteady. What? Who are you? I am Riken, he said, meeting her gaze. And you? You are my mate. The words hung in the air like lightning. Nivra gasped, a sound filled with pure outrage. No, she spat. That's impossible. She's nothing. She's wolfless. A useless runt. This must be a mistake. Riken's head snapped toward her. Do you dare, he whispered dangerously, question your king? Do you dare speak of my lunar like that? Nivra's face went white. My lunar. Those words crushed every dream she'd ever had. Sultren finally found his voice, thin and shaking. Your Majesty, please, this is all a misunderstanding. She's sickly. She isn't worthy. My other daughter, Nevra, she enough. Riken's tone cracked through the clearing like splitting ice. He stepped fully in front of Erilyn. shielding her with his body. You would sell your own blood, he said, his voice a cold, deliberate blade. You would trade my mate for a patch of land. He glared at Sultran and Dravor both. You haven't just broken my law, you've committed the greatest insult our world knows. He unclipped the heavy fur-lined cloak from his shoulders, the black cloak marked with the obsidian wolf sigil of the Magnus line, and draped it around Erilyn. It swallowed her small frame, but it warmed her instantly. It smelled of storm winds and steel and winter of him. And you, Riken said to Sultran and Dravor, voice flat as judgment. You will answer for this. He signaled to his scions. My guard will take you to the citadel for sentencing. But first, you will watch as I claim what you treated as worthless. He turned to Erilyn again and extended his arm, a gesture so gentle, so old-world, it felt almost unreal after the violence. Come, he said softly. You are safe now. Let's go home. Erilyn looked at Sultran, now on his knees in the dirt. She looked at Nivra, whose face twisted in furious disbelief. She looked at Dravor, bound by the king's guard, hatred burning in his eyes. And then she looked at Riken, the most powerful, terrifying man she had ever seen, yet the only one who had ever looked at her as if she mattered. Her useless life was gone. Something new and terrifying and vast was beginning. With a shaking breath, she placed her hand on his arm. The journey to the citadel blurred together. There were no goodbyes, there was no one to give them. Erilyn was escorted away, still clinging to Rikon's arm, leaving behind her, past her family, and the pack that had discarded her. She was placed inside a Fenrir-class transport, an enormous, armored vehicle, more fortress than truck. The interior was stark but refined leather, seating cold steel, and the faint, omnipresent scent of ozone, the king's scent. Riken, who insisted she call him by his given name in private, saying, Riken is the king, Rikke is the man, sat across from her. Riken sat across from her. He didn't say a word, and she was grateful for the quiet. She was still reeling, suspended somewhere between shock and disbelief. Her mind so used to a cramped, colorless world of chores, silence, and insults, couldn't piece together the reality of what had happened. He had called her his mate, his lunar, his queen. Those were titles reserved for powerful women, women like Nivra, not for someone like her. Erilyn stared down at her hands twisting together in her lap. His cloak was still draped around her shoulders, its weight warm and heavy as if anchoring her to a future she didn't dare imagine. The vehicle rolled over rough terrain, the wheels thudding rhythmically beneath them. Riken watched her, not the way Dravor had assessed her, not the way Sultran had judged her. His stare was sharp, searching, undeniably possessive. You're afraid, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Erilyn nodded, her throat too tight for speech. Of me, he asked. She hesitated, then nodded again, barely. Riken exhaled, dragging a hand through his dark hair. It was the first hint of exhaustion she'd ever seen from him. That's understandable, he said. Given what you've been through. His voice softened. I won't lie to you, Erilyn. Our world is brutal, and I can be brutal when I must. His gaze locked with hers. But that brutality will never touch you. You are the other half of my soul. The goddess chose this bond. He leaned forward, icy eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. I will not hurt you, he said. I won't force you, but I will protect you, and I will have you beside me. Do you understand? I'm wolfless, she whispered. The word felt like poison on her tongue. It was the only identity she had ever known. I'm broken. I can't be your lunar. I'm not anything. Riken's expression hardened. Is that what they told you? He asked. It's what I am. No, he said firmly. It's what you were. He leaned closer. The bond doesn't make mistakes. If you're wolfless, then I'm mated to a wolfless woman. It changes nothing. He sounded so certain. But he didn't understand, not the shame, not the empty place where a wolf should have lived. The citadel came into view, a fortress carved straight into the mountainside, a monolith of stone and fire. It wasn't a castle. It was a mountain itself, alive with ancient power. Gray stone, black steel, endless roaring flames. It was terrifying and breathtaking. Instead of a dungeon or a cell, she was led to a sprawling suite of rooms connected to the king's own chambers. They were warm and grand, thick furs, a crackling hearth, a balcony overlooking an ocean of peaks. Several servants' wolves, all respectful, waited silently. See to her, Raycon commanded a stern-faced older woman. Erilyn blinked. Ilaris Nome. This was Miralyn, the head healer. She's exhausted and underfed, Raycon said. Get her new clothes. Feed her. Treat her gently. He turned to Erilyn. I have to pass judgment on Soltran and Draver. It won't be pleasant. You'll be safe here. No one will harm you. You have my word. He paused with his hand on the doorframe. Do you need anything? Overwhelmed. Erilyn only shook her head. He nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on her a moment longer. Rest, Erilyn. Your new life starts now. Then he was gone. Miralyn approached with a gentle smile. Come, my lady, she said softly. Let's get you out of those clothes. Erilyn was bathed in a massive tub that felt more like a warm, lavender-scented lake. Her hair was washed and brushed her cuts and bruises, treated with soothing balms. She was dressed in a soft gown of deep blue velvet that felt impossibly luxurious. Food arrived: hot stew, warm bread, cheese, roasted apples. Erilyn ate with the desperation of someone who hadn't known real meals for weeks. Which wasn't far from the truth. The king. He called me his mate, she said quietly, as Miralyn brushed her damp hair. He did, my lady, Miralyn replied, her hand steady. The bond is sacred. For a king of the Magnus line, it means everything. He's waited a long time for this. But I'm not worthy, Erilyn, whispered shame rising like a tide. Miralyn stopped brushing. She met Erilyn's reflection in the mirror. My lady, the goddess, doesn't choose based on worth. She chooses based on purpose. Erilyn whispered the words, the old shame rising like smoke in her chest. Miralyn paused mid-brush and met Erilyn's eyes in the mirror. My lady, the goddess, does not choose mates based on worth, the healer said softly. She chooses based on necessity. The king is a storm-ice shadow, and power woven together. Someone like him needs a counterbalance. What exactly he needs, we cannot yet know. Miralyn smiled gently. But the goddess chose you. And in 40 years of tending alphas and lunas, I've learned one thing: the goddess is never wrong. For the first time in Erilyn's life, she felt something spark inside her. Not hope, something smaller than that. But it wasn't dread. She collapsed an hour later, not from fear, but from sheer emotional and physical exhaustion. She fell asleep before her head fully sank into the mountain of silk pillows, safe in the king's stronghold. While the king himself descended into the dungeons to pass judgment on the men who had tried to sell her. Erilyn woke to shouting. Not the drunken chaos of Silver Moon's pack hall. This was different. Controlled. Cold. Precise. And the anger was coming from the adjoining chamber, the king's throne room. She slipped from the bed, the velvet soft floor warm beneath her bare feet. Riken's cloak remained draped over a chair. She wrapped it around herself, its weight and scent strangely comforting. She crept to the massive oak doors, separating her suite from the hall. They were cracked open, just enough for her to see. Raycon sat on the high-backed throne, not lounging, but perched forward like a predator ready to strike. His face was carved from fury. Below him, kneeling on the stone floor, were two figures: Soltran and Draver, bound and seething. Nivra stood off to the side, pale and trembling with fury. You have confessed to breaking primal law, Riken said, his voice dangerously low. You trafficked a pack member. You forged a rogue alliance. You threatened the stability of the northern ridge. The penalty for this is death, Alpha Dravor. The girl was payment, Dravor snarled. A wolfless runt. She was nothing. You stole my silence, Riken commanded. Dravor choked on his own breath, his body folding under the raw Alpha authority. You have no right to speak, Riken said. Then his gaze shifted to Sultran, cold and merciless. And you, Alpha Sultran, you would sell your own blood. You would let my mate be auctioned like livestock. Sultran was openly weeping. Your Majesty, I didn't know. She is worthless. A drain on my pack. I did what I had to. For your people, Riken let out a chilling laugh. You sacrificed the single most valuable person in your territory to clean up your own failed dealings with Thorncroft Holdings. You are no leader. You are a coward. Nivra snapped, then her entire future collapsing in front of her. Alpha King. She cried, stumbling forward. The scions moved instantly, but Riken lifted a hand, halting them. Nivra dropped to her knees, golden hair spilling like silk around her. She was breathtaking in her desperation. My king, please, she begged. My father is a fool, but he is not wrong. Nivra jabbed a trembling finger toward Erlin's hidden door. She is not your mate. It's a trick. She's defective, weak. I am the strong one, the true daughter of Silver Moon. My wolf is the fastest in our pack. I would make a better Lunar. The queen you deserve, not her. The throne room froze. Riken stared at Nivra, his expression unreadable. Then he rose from his throne, each step down the stone stairway deliberate, predatory. He stood before Nivra. She lifted her chin, eyes bright with desperate hope. You, he said softly, are your father's daughter. You see only power. You see only weakness. You see a title. He looked past her, past the guards, his gaze locking unerringly onto the thin crack of the door where Erlin stood frozen. He had known she was there the entire time. Your sister, he said, voice echoing through the hall, is my mate. Riken's voice rose with the weight of command, every word echoing through the throne room. She is your queen. And you, his gaze sharpened to a blade, you are a traitor who tried to sell her for a crown. Know your place. He turned back to his throne. Dravor, for your crimes your rank is stripped. You will be confined in the shadow cells. And you, Sultran, he continued, his tone colder, still are relieved of your title. The Silver Moon Pack will fall under my authority until a worthy Alpha is chosen. Nivra, he said, his voice cutting through the air like frost, you will be sent to the Silent Sisters' Coven in the West. Perhaps they can teach you humility. No, Nivra screamed. You can't, I can. His voice was iron. Take them. As the guards moved in the atmosphere, cracked pressure, terror, the sting of rejection, and beneath it all, the frightening, relentless pull of the mate bond. And then Erlin's body broke. A scream tore from her chest, raw, burning, and she stumbled into the throne room, clutching her heart like it was unraveling. Erlin Riken roared, moving faster than instinct. He caught her as her knees gave out. But this wasn't a faint. Her body convulsed violently. A golden pulsating light began flickering beneath her skin. What is this? Sultran shouted. The Bond Miralyn yelled as she rushed in. It's forcing a change. But she has no wolf. She can't survive this. No. Erlin gasped, another white-hot wave ripping through her. It felt like her bones were splintering, her muscles tearing apart with no wolf to take the pain. Riken! She screamed, gripping his shirt like a lifeline. I'm here, Erlin. He growled, pouring power into her through the bond. I'm here. Fight. But the light only intensified, brighter, until it exploded outward in a violent burst that blasted everyone off their feet, even the king. Erlin rose off the ground, suspended in the air, her body arched in a silent cry of agony. And then she changed. It wasn't the flesh-twisting brutality of an ordinary shift. It was transformation, light, shadow, and power intertwining. Her human shape dissolved into a pillar of pure white radiance, and when it reformed, what landed on the stone floor of the throne room wasn't a girl. It was a wolf. A massive one, larger even than Raikon's alpha form. Its fur wasn't silver or gray, it was white, pure as untouched snow glowing from within. The creature was lean, lethal, breathtaking. And its eyes were hers. Violet, luminous, ancient. She wasn't wolfless. Sultran's staggered face chalk white. It's impossible. The Valen line, he whispered. Salis, her mother. Dravor stared, terror swallowing his features. The lunar prime, he choked out. A myth. A legend. The great white wolf turned its head, studying the claws at the end of its limbs, then Riken, who stared back, awestruck. Then it turned toward her family. The wolf opened its jaws and released a sound not of this world. Not a howl, not a growl. A low, resonant hum of power, so deep it vibrated the stones beneath their feet. The sound of authority, the sound of truth. Nivra collapsed unconscious. Sultran wept openly, undone. Erilyn, the runt, the wolfless girl, had awakened. And she was legend. The great wolf swept its gaze across the room, senses flooding her. She smelled Dravor's terror, Nivra's jealousy, Sultran's regret. But strongest of all, she smelled Rikan. The ozone and winter scent was more than just a smell now. It was safety. It was recognition. It was mate. Riken rose slowly, reverent, never breaking eye contact. Erilyn, he said softly. The giant wolf tilted her head. She tried to speak, but only a low growl slipped out, panic flashing in her violet eyes. It's all right, Riken murmured, stepping closer. Shift back. Come back to me. Picture yourself. Riken murmured, voice steady and grounding. Picture the woman I see. Erilyn closed her massive glowing eyes and focused on his voice, his scent, the anchoring weight of him. The pulsing light beneath her fur intensified, then her wolf form collapsed back into pure energy. The brilliance folded inward, reshaping, and suddenly she was on the floor, human again, naked and shaking, wrapped only in the glow of her own power. Rikan was there, instantly stripping off his tunic and pulling it around her small trembling body, gathering her into his broad warm chest. She stammered, clinging to him. Breath shuddering. What am I? You, he said, emotion, thickening his voice in a way she'd never heard before, are extraordinary. He turned sharply as Veltric and the other law-keepers rushed in, drawn by the surge of power. The archives, Riken commanded, now. Bring me everything on the Valen lineage and the Lunar Prime, every document, every scrap of history. The next few days blurred together a flood of revelations. Judgment on her family was delayed. Riken refused to leave her side. Miralen and the law-keepers were ordered to tend to her while the archives were torn apart for answers. And they found them truths buried for centuries. The Valen bloodline wasn't a minor northern branch. It was the original line. The Valen wolves were the first Luna's mates of the earliest Alpha Kings. They weren't warriors, they were something far greater. Amplifiers, Veltric explained, voice trembling as he read from a delicate scroll. They didn't just rule beside the king, they magnified him. A Lunar Prime's presence could soothe feuding packs, halt a battle, calm a feral wolf, or strengthen an entire territory. But they were hunted, Riken said, his tone darkening. Yes, my king. Veltric pointed to another brittle passage. Rogue Alpha's Dravor types saw them as a threat. A unified kingdom meant less chaos, less power for them. They formed a coalition, the Scorched Earth Pact, to wipe the Valen line out. Erilyn listened, hand locked in Rikon's horror. twisting inside her. My mother. She was one of them. Sultran, finally dragged in for questioning, told the truth at last. Her name was Salis, he choked out. The last of her kind. Her family was slaughtered. She fled south. I found her. He looked at Erilyn with a torment that almost broke him. She was terrified. And when you were born, she knew. She could feel the power in you, even as a baby. She feared the hunters would track you, the same way they tracked her. So what did you do? Rakan demanded. She sought out a hush witch, Sultran said, voice cracking. Othrin. She had your wolf bound. A blood-binding ritual to hide you, your scent, your power. Everything. She made me swear to protect you, to keep you hidden. Erilyn's voice trembled. You knew I knew something was there, Sultran whispered. But when Salis died, I was alone. Nivra was strong, normal. And you? You were quiet blank. The spell made you seem empty. He lowered his head. And over time, I forgot it was a spell at all. I saw what everyone else saw. A runt. A failure. His voice cracked. I thought I was protecting you, keeping you weak so no one would notice you, so the hunters wouldn't return. I convinced myself ignoring you was safety. He swallowed hard. But I was wrong. I was so afraid of losing you to the outside world that I let the pack destroy you from the inside. Erilyn felt no anger, only a hollow, aching sadness. Her entire life of misery was an attempt at protection. The binding spell, Miralyn said gravely, would have stunted your growth, your strength, your vitality. It explains your frailty. Why the awakening moon didn't touch you. The spell was too powerful. But the mate bond. Riken finished his grip tightening around Erilyn's hand, the bond between an Alpha King and a lunar prime. It was the only force alive that could break it. He looked at her, then eyes no longer icy but blazing hot. They didn't just neglect you, he growled. They didn't just sell you. They blinded themselves to you. They hid a goddess and called her a slave. And from that moment forward, Riken began to train her not to fight, not yet, but to control the power that was always meant to be hers. Her power was wild, unrefined, elemental. She didn't merely shift into a wolf. She became the wolf. Every lesson Riken and Miralyn guided her through sharpened what lived inside her. She learned to sense the emotional currents pulsing through the citadel, fear, anger, grief, tension. A single soft hum from her could quiet an entire courtyard. She carried a kind of peace that made even the scions of Magnus, the deadliest wolves on the continent, bow their heads in instinctive respect. She wasn't crafted for war. She was crafted for command. She wasn't a weapon. She was a queen. But as her strength grew, as the bond between her and Riken forged itself into something unbreakable, a force of fire and ice, something darker stirred below the citadel. Draver, locked deep within the shadow cells, was not idle. He had seen her. He knew exactly what she was, and he talked. The shadow cells were carved deep under the mountain-damp stone, cold iron runic wards to contain magic. But not even they could stop a rumor. In his fury and unraveling mind, Draver whispered to a guard with a cousin in a bitter, discontented minor pack. It's the lunar prime, Draver hissed. The king found the Valen witch. She'll bend every wolf to her will. She'll enslave us all. A lie born of madness and fear. And it spread like wildfire. The rogue packs, those who resented Riken's unified rule, those who longed for the brutal feudal chaos of old, seized the rumor with both hands. They didn't see the Valen line as peacekeepers. They saw a weapon. They saw a threat. And they decided she had to die. Within a week, an alliance of rogue alphas led by the scattered remnants of the Obsidian Claw, still loyal to Dravor, marched on the citadel in secret. The alarm sounded at sunset. Riken stood beside Erilyn on the great balcony, fastening the black armor across his chest, each piece forged in storm metal. The air around him crackled with ozone-charged electric, ready for war. "How many?" Erilyn asked. Her voice no longer trembled. The past weeks had reshaped her. "Too many," he answered grimly. "Draver's poison has fed their fears. They believe you're a threat to their freedom. They're not here for land, Erilyn. They're here to erase you." He cupped her face between his hands. "You must go below, the inner chambers. Miralyn will protect you." "No!" His eyes widened slightly. "Erilyn, this isn't a debate. This is a war." "And I am a legend," she said, placing her hand over his. "They fear a myth. They fear me. I won't cower. You're not a warrior." "No," she said softly, her violet eyes burning. "You are the warrior. You are the king's blade." "But I—" She lifted her chin. "I am your shield. Let me stand with you." The first wave hit the outer gates, steel clashing roars echoing up the mountain. The battlefield erupted into wolves' teeth, fire and blood. Riken looked at her, the unbreakable steel in her spine, the aura of power glowing faintly around her. He didn't see the broken girl from Silver Moon. He saw his queen. "By my side," he commanded. "Always," she answered. They stood together atop the ramparts as hell tore open below. Riken directed the Scions' movements, precise and deadly, but the rogue packs fought like creatures with nothing to lose. They swarmed the lower walls, a tidal wave of fur and rage. Then another force appeared, small fast, cutting through the flank. "Traitors on the south side," a Scion shouted. "They've breached the weight," Riken said sharply. The new wolves weren't attacking the citadel. They were attacking the rogue pack. Leading them was a massive gray wolf fighting with a desperate, reckless fury Erilyn recognized instantly. She gasped. Father, Soltren, stripped of his title, his pack, his name, an outcast. But he had heard she was in danger, and he came anyway. He rallied the few Silver Moon warriors who still honored his blood even if they no longer respected him, and hurled himself into a battle he could not win. They tore through the rogue lines, buying crucial time for the citadel. But they were far too few. Karen, the rogue alpha, leading the assault, spotted Soltren, the traitor, the father of the Valen witch. Karen lunged, claws flashing for Soltren's throat. No, Erilyn screamed. Her father was too far. Riken too occupied. No one could reach Soltren in time. Erilyn stood on the rampart, the battle raging below. She watched the man who had once sold her now prepare to die for her. Erilyn saw it all, rage, terror, the chaos ripping across the battlefield, every violent thread woven into a single moment. She drew in a shaking breath, shut her eyes, and reached inward. Not for her wolf, not for the blinding light, but for the deeper resonance, the ancient sacred force of the lunar prime. When she opened her mouth, she didn't scream. She called. It wasn't a sound. It was power, a tidal wave of pure authority and devastating serenity. The force rippled outward from her chest in a pulse of white gold light, washing across the battlefield like the breath of the moon itself. It was the opposite of war. It was harmony, so perfect, so complete that it shattered, the rage infecting every wolf below. One by one, warriors dropped to their knees. Claws retracted, snarls choked silent in their throats. Hatred simply evaporated, replaced by disoriented, stunned stillness. The battlefield went silent. Charon, his claws frozen, inches from Soltren's throat, stopped mid-strike, eyes blown wide with unwilling awe as the Lunar Prime's command crushed the violence from his muscles. Into that impossible silence, Riken's voice rolled like thunder. The battle is over. Standing beside Erilyn on the rampart, the Alpha King faced the army that had come to destroy her. You marched here fearing a witch, he declared. Now you see the truth. His voice carried across the mountain like a decree written into the air itself. This is no weapon of domination. This is a blessing of peace. The rogues trembled beneath the weight of his power. You will lay down your arms, Rikan commanded. You will return to your lands, and you will remember what real power looks like. He extended his hand. Erilyn, her glow softening, the last traces of energy fading across her skin, placed her fingers in his. The rogue army didn't flee in fear. They withdrew in awe. The war ended without a final blow. Soltran looked up at his daughter, Erilyn, the queen, forged from the ashes of betrayal, and something in him broke. Not pride, not grief, something deeper. He didn't beg. He didn't speak. He simply bowed his head, lowered in the kind of respect reserved for legends. Erilyn had never been sold. She had been unleashed. Her family discarded her, not knowing they were throwing away the last lunar prime in existence. It took the devotion of a king, the mate, who saw her worth when her own blood did not to show the world who she truly was. The girl they called useless became the most powerful queen the territories had ever known. Erilyn, the lunar prime. Rikan, the Alpha King. Together they ruled her calm, balancing his storm, her presence healing what centuries of bloodshed had broken. It was never about the power she carried. It was about the courage to claim herself when the world told her she was nothing. What did you think of Erilyn's journey? Was Soltran's redemption earned or too little, too late? If you enjoyed this story, tap like, share, and subscribe to keep the fire burning, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next tale. Until next time, know your worth. Stay fierce.